So I think we all need to give the media a little helping hand with doing their job. Israel, just a starting point, Israel has nuclear weapons. Start there and then carry on with your news coverage. If the media is not point blank saying Israel has nuclear weapons, something's wrong on a level that I cannot even, well, I can explain it, but I think I'd scare the crap out of all you guys. Israel has nuclear weapons. The media is not reporting that one fact, that just like they're aliens. There are certain things that the media will not report. Aliens, they won't report on Israel. They would never report it on, what is that man's name? McConnell. He was wholly out. I wondered for the longest time who was protecting him, because it certainly wasn't Putin. It was Israel, because they protect they have full control of the narrative. I used to wonder why Tucker Carlson left the Democrat, because he used to be on CNN, I think it was, before he went over to Fox. And I've watched him. The guy is smart. So when I saw him on Fox, I was like, that's an act, right? Then he got sued. Proved. All an act. But he has come out and said that, one, he's not focusing on the alien stuff anymore. He's seen what he needs to see. It's directly tied to the religious right. Those guys know what's going on, and it's tied to Israel. I'm one of the few people who's really willing to say point blank, something's going on. The alien issue in the sky is directly connected to the alien issue on the ground. Bet you a bazillion dollars. So the alien issue in the sky is connected to the alien issue on the ground. I wrote the media quite a number of times about this, that I said, it feels to me like there are aliens here, right, who are using our immigrant refugee problem. Now they're exacerbating it, and they're using it to remain hidden. I think there's valid data right there. Now, looking at all of the protests that are going on across the country, the peaceful protests, what we know is that the entire time when Biden was in office, and they tried to, from the very moment he took office in 2020, try to get a bill passed on immigration. And the Republicans, the MAGA, basically said, no, don't pass it. And Trump told us exactly why he didn't want the bill passed. He did not want the bill passed because he wanted to use the issue to win, and now as propaganda, going after his own citizens. Miller is going to get him impeached.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump. And the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
Israel enjoys an immunity that is simply unparalleled. And a question becomes, how is this possible? In order to answer that question, we really do need to go back to the 1960s when John F. Kennedy was president. Now, President Kennedy was insisting that the American Zionist Council, the precursor to the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, otherwise known as AIPAC, be registered as a foreign agent. This would have seriously diminished the capacity of this lobby to affect American policy. Kennedy was also insisting that Dimona, Israel's nuclear power plant, be inspected by the United States. Unfortunately, we all know what happened to John F. Kennedy.
The other problem Kennedy faced with Israel was the construction of the atomic reactor at Dimona. JFK was strongly against any proliferation of nuclear weaponry. He had been assured by Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion that Dimona was designed for peaceful uses of atomic energy. In the spring of 1963, Kennedy demanded full inspections by the U.S. of the Dimona reactor and threatened to place American aid for Israel in limbo if no agreement were reached. And at the time of his assassination, negotiations were in process for biannual inspections.
How many nuclear weapons does Iran have as of today?
Right now, I hope none.
Okay, how many does Israel have?
No idea.
No idea. You were in the government. They don't tell you that stuff.
No idea.
Who do they tell?
No idea.
Do you recognize the hypocrisy of Israel
No.
having a secret illicit nuclear weapons program that it won't open up its doors to and won't talk about, and then lecturing everyone else in the region about nuclear
Absolutely
weapons?
not. You know why?
You talked about hypocrisy. If an Iranian guest came on my show and I asked him about Iran's nuclear program, he said, I don't know, I'm not going to talk about it. Would you be okay with that? You'd be outraged.
Of course,
and
I
yet
would
you
be.
sit here as a former
Of course
minister
I
of
would
the
be,
Israeli
because-
government saying, oh, I don't know, I never talked about nukes with anyone.
Because there was like 16 United Nations Security Council resolutions against Iran.
And there is against Israel. And there is against Israel as well.
About
Your nuclear
issues?
program?
No.
Yes, there is. UN Resolution 487. Let me read it to you. The UN Security Council in 1981 says, calls upon Israel urgently to place its nuclear facilities under the safeguards of the IAEA. Why haven't you done that?
Because
Iran has never attacked a neighbor. Israel has repeatedly attacked its neighbors. Iran signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel has refused to sign. Iran submits to inspection by the International Nuclear Energy Agency. Israel refuses to submit. Iran has no nuclear weapons. Israel has between 75 and 400 nuclear weapons. So Israel poses an existential threat to Iran. For the last 40 years, Israel has conducted a systematic campaign of disinformation about Iran. Why the lies? Why the double standards? Why the hypocrisy?
Israel has a secret nuclear program that they stole from the United States, that they do not allow inspections of, that they have not signed the international nuclear deproliferation treaties for, that they will not talk about. And Iran does not have nukes. So it's the nuclear armed rogue nation accusing the non-nuclear armed nation of getting nukes.
They always accuse you what they're guilty of. Like, you
it's
know,
the most bizarre, and like the internet, no one notices, no one realizes, everyone's just going about their shit.
Good morning. Hey, today we're going to take a quick look at how Israel acquired nuclear weapons and asking the question, do they have the moral high ground to go after Iran? And we're also going to take a look at how ChatGPT, how AI responds first, and then how it responds after I give it a second prompt. So let's go. So Israel's acquisition of nuclear weapons is a sensitive and complex issue, shrouded in secrecy and often not officially acknowledged by Israel itself. However, extensive historical records and expert analysis provides a relatively clear picture. Now, this first read is going to include just AI's, what is because AI is fed data, right? Data in. We then use it and it spits the narratives in the ecosystem back out to us. And this is the narrative that it is feeding about how Israel acquired nuclear weapons. Early efforts in French collaboration, 1950s to the 1960s. Israel initiated a nuclear program in the late 1950s. France was instrumental in helping Israel build the Dimona nuclear reactor, officially labeled a research reactor, but widely understood to be capable of weapons-grade plutonium production. Shimon Peres played a key diplomatic role in securing French cooperation. Dimona reactor and plutonium production. The reactor at Dimona in the Negev Desert became operational in 1962. From the mid-1960s, Israel is believed to have started producing weapons-grade plutonium. Nuclear ambiguity, 1960s to the present. Israel maintains a policy of nuclear ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying possessions of nuclear weapons. This ambiguity has served to deter regional adversaries while avoiding international pressure or sanctions. Now, listen. This is how Israel gets away with it, because what they do is they state their position, and they say, which is their reality. Remember, they're creating a reality, and what you're going to do is you're either going to step into that reality and agree with them, or you're going to stay outside of that reality, maintain your control over your thoughts, your perception and interpretation of reality, and state yours while they remain in ambiguity. If you listen to a lot of their PR people on TV, they remain in, they live in the land of ambiguity. And that ambiguity serves to deter regional or international adversaries on the narrative front. Revelations and estimates. In 1986, Israeli technician Mordechai Vanunu revealed extensive details about Israel's nuclear arsenal to the media, notably to Britain's Sunday Times. Let's see. I've got ChatGPT. A lot of people are like, why do you use AI? So let's go to some newspapers here. Here is, this is an article from 2014. Read that article. So when Vanunu, a humble Israeli technician who worked for years at Israel's secret nuclear site in Dimona, spilled the beans about Israel's nuclear weapons in 1986, very bad things happened to him. He was lured from safety in England for an Italian holiday by a woman who was an Israeli secret agent, drugged and kidnapped from Italy by other Israeli agents and imprisoned for 18 years. 11 of them in solitary confinement. Okay, so today, Israel is estimated by international experts and institutions to possess between 80 to 400 nuclear warheads, with the general consensus around 100 to 200. Now, does Israel have the moral high ground with Iran? They say this is a highly contested and dependent upon one's perspective. No, really it isn't. Israel has stolen what it has. It says Israel argues Iran has openly threatened Israel's existence. And they say that this justifies measures against Iran's nuclear program. Israel is currently threatening the United States and any country that dares take its sovereignty from Israel. Many countries and international. So does Israel have the moral high ground? And it's going to give Israel's positions, Iran's position, international perspectives. Many countries and international bodies highlight a double standard in the international community. So there's no point in reading Israel's position and Iran's position because it's a double standard in the international community, noting that Israel has faced little accountability, none, for its nuclear program, while other countries, notably Iran, face rigorous scrutiny and sanctions. Moral high ground analysis. The morality of Israel's stance largely depends on the following points. Transparency. Israel demands transparency from Iran, but maintains secrecy around its nuclear arsenal. NPT compliance. Iran has never signed the NPT and thus faces no formal international obligations. Iran, as a signatory, must adhere to stricter rules. Regional stability. Supporters argue Israel's nuclear capability has stabilized the region by providing deterrence. I don't know. So it stabilized the region by Netanyahu and the neocons creating a 1996 clean break document where they intended to go in 5 countries in 7 years to destabilize the region. Make it make sense. Israel's acquisition of nuclear weapons involves strategic secrecy and diplomatic maneuvering. And when you listen to ChatGPT talk like this, ChatGPT is talking like, like as a person who has had reads of intelligence stuff, I can appreciate the capacity in other people's intelligence abilities. And that's how I hear AI talking about it. But what AI is missing is the nuance of the situation. And so we have to go a little bit deeper. And that little bit deeper is, tell me again in detail how Israel got nuclear weapons. Please use the truth and not Israel's narrative. I noticed what was left out was JFK's, his trouble with AIPAC. Let's see here. Yeah. What did they steal from the U.S. to get their nuclear program? Here is a detailed, truthful account distinct from the mainstream Israeli narrative of how Israel acquired nuclear weapons, including the conflict with President John F. Kennedy and the espionage involved. How Israel truly acquired nuclear weapons. Early stages, late 1940s to the 50s. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, prioritized obtaining nuclear capability as critical to Israel's long-term security. Is anyone else aware of this? So if this was done in the late 1940s and 50s, this right here tells you why Israel is going after Iran and has been from jump. It is solely because Israel wants to be the only ones with nuclear weapons in that region. Because when they went into Palestine and took that land, remember, there were 2 other locations that they had thought about taking, stealing. And that tells us what they were looking for was a foothold to spread. Israel established a small nuclear program under the cover of scientific research and development in the late 1940s and early 50s. I didn't know that. Initially, it faced technological and resource limitations. It attached itself to the U.S., and it got the help that it needed. Secret alliance with France. We know about the secret alliance. Israel struck a crucial covert partnership with France during the mid-1950s. Let's see here. France provided technical expertise, nuclear reactor components, and training to Israeli nuclear scientists and engineers. By 1962, it was operational. Espionage against the United States. I'm going to read this in the next video. Okay, part 2. So now we're heading into espionage against the United States. So we're talking about how did Israel get their nuclear weapons? Espionage against the United States. To accelerate its nuclear ambitions, Israel engaged in extensive espionage against its ally, the United States. Key U.S. nuclear materials and sensitive technology were illicitly obtained by Israeli agents after operating within the U.S. The most notable espionage event was the NUMEC affair in the 1960s. NUMEC stands for Nuclear Materials and Equipment Cooperation. It was based in Apollo, Pennsylvania, run by Zionist sympathizer Zalman Shapiro. In the mid-1960s, roughly 200 to 300 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, enough for several nuclear weapons, disappeared from NUMEC. Declassified FBI and CIA documents strongly suggest NUMEC materials ended up in Israel's nuclear weapons program. Although investigated by the U.S., the usual happens when it's Israel. Intense political pressure prevented a full public acknowledgement and prosecution. Conflict with President JFK. Early 1960s. President Kennedy strongly opposed Israel's nuclear weapons ambitions, advocating nuclear non-proliferation globally. Kennedy was alarmed when U.S. intelligence discovered Israel's covert nuclear developments at Dimona. Kennedy directly confronted Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion in 1961 and again in 1963, insisting upon regular American inspections in Dimona. Kennedy also faced significant pressure from AIPAC and pro-Israel lobbying groups within the U.S. opposing his demands for transparency. The Israeli government repeatedly stalled and misled American inspectors hiding underground plutonium reprocessing facilities during limited visits. Kennedy's assassination and aftermath. Now, when we have American legislators, and really it's only the ones on the right who are telling us this. But when they come out and say things like, if you don't support Israel, you will be cursed. This is what they mean. President Kennedy's assassination in November 1963 dramatically altered U.S.-Israeli nuclear dynamics. Kennedy's successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, was much more favorable to Israel, ceasing to press strongly for inspections or transparency. The political shift allowed Israel to proceed essentially unhindered toward achieving operational nuclear weapons capability. By around 1967-68, before the Six-Day War, intelligence estimates suggest Israel had produced its first nuclear devices. Now remember, I have a theory. I have a Tower of Babel theory that whenever humanity starts to make a trajectory up, there are aliens that show up and begin to tamp down, or some mechanism within the ecosystem gets set in motion that puts human progress down. And in order to do that, humans will be used for that purpose. Let me backtrack a little bit. So in 1948, when nuclear war was taking place, it is said that aliens showed up. They did. They were in the sky. We've got video. You can watch the documentary UFOs and Nukes. And those UFOs were able to stop the nukes from, they disarmed them, basically. It is my new theory that from that point forward, aliens have been on the front, active in our global government apparatus. And I will bet anybody bet you. Okay, so let's keep going. By around 1967-68, before the Six-Day War, intelligence estimates suggest Israel had produced its first nuclear device. It says, the Vanunu revelations. Israel's nuclear program remained officially secret until Vanunu, a former Israeli nuclear technician, revealed explicit evidence in 1986. I showed you a newspaper article of that. He was kidnapped by Mossad agents, secretly tried and imprisoned for 18 years. Israel's nuclear arsenal today, although never officially acknowledged by Israel, we don't need it to be acknowledged by Israel. We know they have them. Let's get out of this ambiguity. Credible international estimates suggest Israel possesses approximately 100. This is just like when we were dealing with the two-state solution. Israel doesn't want a two-state solution, nor do they want peace. They want dominance, not just over Israel, but they want dominance over America and anywhere else where they can get agreements. Dear Africa, dear Africa, dear Africa, get these. One of the ways that Africa made the emails was I wrote numerous times. You've got to get these missionaries out of your country. They are nothing more than an extension of Israel. And what Israel is doing in America is assisting Trump in taking away black people's rights. Israel maintains a policy of nuclear opacity. Doesn't exist. That only exists because y'all are letting it exist. Not true. They have nuclear weapons, and the reason why they're trying to make sure Iran has no nuclear weapons is so they can dominate. And once they have nuclear weapons, and they're the only ones with nuclear weapons in the region, Iran, keep your nuclear weapons. Keep them. Yeah, I said it. Keep them and maintain them for your security. And why am I saying that? Because I'm in a country where I had a premonition in 2017 where I understood that my country was going to be changed in such a way that they were not going to be protecting me. And that's exactly what's happening. Trump is moving to attempt, I always like to say attempt, he's making moves to make sure that this country will not be able to protect folks who are brown. So we know that. We know it's happening in LA. It happened in Seattle in 2020. Does Israel have the moral authority to confront Iran's nuclear program? No. The moral standing of Israel's opposition to Iran's nuclear ambitions is deeply contested. Espionage and theft. Israel's acquisition involved direct espionage, theft, and deception, undermining its moral authority to demand transparency from other nations. Kennedy's opposition. JFK's firm opposition highlights a historical ethical concern over Israeli proliferation, showing a recognized need for transparency that Israel resisted. hypocrisy. Israel demands stringent measures against Iran while itself being completely opaque about its nuclear weapons and refusing any form of international oversight. They refuse any. See, if these guys were really the chosen people, the UN would be an organization today assisting countries across the globe to do better on behalf of their people. But that's not who Israel is today. Double standards. Critics argue Israel benefits from a double standard enforced primarily by the U.S. political influence and pro-lobbying groups, notably AIPAC, which consistently protects Israel from accountability. Critics argue Israel benefits from a double standard enforced primarily by the West, not just the U.S., political influence, and by the West because, again, as we know, Schofield Bible was injected into the Christian community, and these folks have been indoctrinated since the 60s. Whole families have been indoctrinated to throw their entire lives away on behalf of Israel. And they can be black, they can be white, they can be Hispanic, they can be any color. Because their love for Jesus was used. Israel's path to nuclear weapons involved covert operations, espionage against its closest ally, the United States, and a carefully maintained secrecy regime. These elements significantly undermines Israel's claim to moral superiority when confronting Iran or other countries seeking similar capabilities. The ethical inconsistencies and historical transgressions surrounding Israel's nuclear acquisitions highlight substantial hypocrisy in international nuclear politics. Tell the real story. Tell the real story.
There does seem to be a connection, the connection between UFOs and nukes.
This is one of the things that I've always heard, is that after the bombs were dropped,
Yes.
that's when the UFO started showing up.
Well, that's when the activity certainly heightened. You got all these like missile control launch officers and people at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Minot Air Force Base, talking about these incredible incursions. Lieutenant Robert Salas, launch control officer, United States Air Force, has this incredible encounter in Malmstrom. UFO sighted, a disc, and then his nuke starts shutting down. I've got at least 15 or 20 of these guys testifying. And keep in mind, you're talking about people that we entrusted with securement and deployment of nuclear weapons, okay? So if these guys are lying, that's a problem. And if these guys are hallucinating when they've got nuclear weapons at their disposal, that's terrifying.
After graduating from college with degrees in physics and math, I entered the Air Force, got a commission, and served 26 years as a communication electronics officer in positions all over the world, including Vietnam. My highest clearance held was a top secret crypto special compartment information talent keyhole. For those that know clearances, you got to be almost squeaky clean to get that. Back in 1967, I was officer in charge of the Communications Center at the 28th Air Division in Great Falls, Montana. I was also the crypto custodian. I was a top secret control officer for the division, and I passed out nuclear launch authenticators. In March of that particular year, I can clearly recall a message coming through my communications center which basically said what Bob has already talked about, that a UFO did in fact shut down several missile silos in Montana. Not being a missile type, I didn't know Oscar flight from Echo flight, so I couldn't relate to any of those details. But the fact was that missiles were shut down by them. Later on, in mid-70s, about 1975, I was commander of a radar site in Maine, which was adjacent to Loring Air Force Base. Periodically, my security cop and I met with the SAC security police. And on 2 occasions that I can recall distinctly, they told us that UFOs were seen over the nuclear weapons storage areas at Loring Air Force Base, which was a SAC bomber base, as some of you may well know. I don't know what the details were. I don't know if any nukes were damaged or deactivated. I never saw a report on that, so I really can't say. That is history. After retiring from the Air Force, I went to work for Boeing as a computer systems analyst. Bob didn't mention this, but one of my first supervisors at Boeing was Robert Kaminsky. He has since passed away. He was the engineer selected by Boeing to go out and investigate the UFOs, the missiles that were shot down. He living close by where I lived in Washington State. We got together frequently on Saturday to discuss UFOs and other topics. And he says, Arnie, those things were perfectly clean, and they did not go down by themselves. He then went on to say that halfway through the investigation, the Air Force sent Boeing a message which said, stop the investigation and do not, repeat, do not send us a report. He told me that personally on 2 or 3 different occasions, and no hesitation at all. In conclusion, I've studied UFOs for over 60 years, believe it or not, and I am convinced that somebody out there is trying to send us a message. If I knew who they were, I probably would not be here. Thanks for your time.
These characters are just being inserted into places to serve Israel. That makes Israel the master of the universe. And that's troubling, because this is a state that has a hexagram on their flag, okay? They're even lying about the history of the Star of David. It's a hexagram. It's a cult. You can't just wipe that away. It's not even a long time ago. There's tons of books. It's showing you that that's a hexagram. What are you pretending? It's a cultic. Yeah, you're just another already trying to wipe history. Like, nope, that's not. That is a religious. No, it's a hexagram. Okay, we're not stupid. We're going to talk about all of that stuff. I could rant about the lies that nation has told. I mean, not even that. The Star of David used to be the flag of Morocco. Okay, why? That's weird. It's not a Jewish state. Why? What was going on in Morocco? What was going on in Algeria and Tunisia and Morocco? Yes, it is an occult nation. There's no question about that. Everything that they are involved in is occult. And that's why we have to sort of wake the world up to this very quickly, because they have a lot of power. And the only way that we are going to be able to fight this is by being willing to tell the truth.
You probably know this as the Star of David on the Israeli Jewish flag, but it's actually the Seal of Solomon, which predates Judaism. He became the king of Israel around the mid-10th century BC. The symbol itself represents alchemical unity. The triangle going up represents the active, solar, masculine energy of the universe, while the triangle going down represents the feminine, passive, and lunar energies of the universe. As above, so below, essentially. The duality of the cosmos, which is also represented by Baphomet going like that, or whatever. How does he do it? Like that? Something like that? Or something like that. Don't take that the wrong way. And as well as the checkerboard in masonry, the black and white checkerboard, which represents duality. These concepts, to your surprise, stem out of ancient tantric sex practices, which occurred within all of the ancient mystery traditions, from Eleusis to the Phoenician bathhouses, where sex rituals were used as both a way to increase or amplify one's life force energy, otherwise known as Qi in Eastern mysticism or Kung Fu movies, or Vril as well, going back to the Vril Society, which Hitler took great inspiration from, as well as the prolonging of climax, which allegedly produced a state of enlightenment and a glimpse at life beyond death. The Seal of Solomon is most prominently recognized from the Lesser Key of Solomon, a 5-book 17th century grimoire for communication with higher or lower entities. Solomon was said to have had himself command over all demons. The symbol became associated with Judaism in the late Middle Ages. It first appeared on medieval Kabbalistic amulets and protective charms, especially in Spanish and Ashkenazi mysticism. Yeah, the Jews are black magicians to a degree. Well, I guess they're Jewish magicians.
These people honestly believe that they are the descendants of gods, that they are the chosen, that they are God's special people, that we are delusional, and that the true creator is this wisdom principle that they think of as Lucifer, that wisdom principle gave us ancient mystery school teachings, and that the enemy, which they call Adonai, the adversary, which we would call the Christian God, came to try to defeat them. Then they even take it a step further and they look at texts like the Bible and they say that where it says in the end times that God will take the money from the wicked and restore it to the just, that we as a planet are the wicked and they are the just. So this is how they justify their financial corruption. They don't believe that we deserve the money. In fact, they believe that if they did not dominate us, and if they did not control us and play all these games, that we left to our own devices would destroy our planet. So in some twisted rationale, they believe they are saving the earth. They believe humans are bad for the environment. We cause pollution, so they have to reduce population. Then they seed that into movies like The Matrix, where Agent Smith says that humans are like a virus on the planet. This is one of a variety of ways in which they will usually embed their teachings into the villain.
Israel employed occult powers and supernatural forces during the recent 12-day conflict between the two countries. Abdullah Ganji, who is the former editor of the IRGC-linked newspaper, made the claim in a post on X. He said that after the war, a few sheets of paper were found on the streets of Tehran containing talismans with Jewish symbols, calling it a strange phenomenon. He also cited previous unverified reports that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had met with occult specialists during the early stages of the Gaza war. Ganji went on to claim that the use of supernatural methods by foreign intelligence services had long been warned about by Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei earlier. He said that hostile countries and Western and Hebrew intelligence services use these supernatural powers and jinn entities for espionage. His post did not go unnoticed and in fact triggered a reaction from Israel's political advisor to the permanent representative at the United Nations. Walid Ghadban responded sarcastically by reposting a Mossad message with the caption, "Jinn are everywhere."
Mate, we got another jellyfish UFO anomaly coming from Saladin, Iraq, okay? Look at the state of this object, bruv, right? We've seen this in America. There was one that was in Poland of this strange S-shaped kind of curved object that floats through the sky, and it looks like it follows a complete grid. It doesn't bob up, it doesn't bob down and get blown by the wind. It just carries a constant trajectory, right? And the one in Poland as well, exact same object, but the one in Poland was morphing real time as well. This object is also rotating and spinning ever so slightly, right? Again, much like all the other sightings of this object, because this is appeared all around the world, people, okay? This is a weird piece of activity. It's completely silent. Right, it moves along like a grid, okay, and the things even in some cases as well have been reported to kind of morph through certain objects, or has like the illusion of morphing through something, which is very, very weird. I mean, the one that was released by the Pentagon a little while ago, which kind of changed heat signatures in real time, I don't know, mate. I don't know what to think of this, okay? The Middle East at the moment is having a lot of activity. We've had stuff come from Lebanon. We've had, where else have we had? We've had it from Syria as well. Iraq's had quite a lot as well. The Free Syrian Army recorded some strange anomalous activity, which kind of looked like a top hat UFO that kind of went whoop, off into the distance. And now we're having this as well. So I have enhanced the footage a little bit, which is why you're probably seeing a little bit of the pixelation there, but because the quality was quite low. But you guys let me know what you think. This is insane.
The people who run our society consider themselves gods, and that's why they're not explaining.
They think they're more than human.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah, I go, they're not even human, because humans care about their environment and their neighbors, and humans care about, you know, other people's children. Of course. And humans care about living things.
Yes.
But they don't do any of that, and he goes, because they think they're more than human.
Oh, I noticed.
They
That's why
think
they want to
they're
live forever.
royals. They think they're like royals in a rarefied sphere of DNA or something above us. Like, did they come from another planet? You know, when you hear people talk, I can't either. But
this is the podcast to speculate on it, though.
Well, because some people say, you know, a lot of religious people, they're into some deep rabbit holes of things, and I don't know anything.
Well, you can see why they are, though. I mean, speaking for myself, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know if this is the Nephilim, right?
I was going to say.
I don't.
I know.
Here we go.
That's what I said.
No. Let me just say. I said I don't know anything about that stuff. Okay, I'm a very ordinary middle-aged man who spent his life following politics, not theology. But I do know that whatever's going on is very deep.
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life around politicians and seen decisions get made interviewed people who run things, and what's happening now is qualitatively different. So different that it's not in the same category at all.
No.
This is hurting people for the sake of hurting them. This is lying for the sake of lying. This is, as the devil
Power
hates
for the
holy
sake
water, they hate the truth. You tell the truth about anything. It almost doesn't matter what it's about. It doesn't have to be about the next election.
That's
It can
right.
just be about history, for example. Telling the truth about history. Why should that offend anybody?
That really pisses
Periods where everyone's dead. And we can't, of course, change the past, so there's nothing really at stake for us now, right? You would think people would welcome open-minded historical inquiry to get closer to what actually happened in whatever period or in whatever event. They hate that.
Yes, they
Well,
do.
what are you watching? You're watching someone who hates the truth because it's true. And there's no possible profit motive that is driving that. There's no political end that is driving that. They hate the truth because it's true. Now we're in the realm of theology.
Who are the Nephilim?
The Nephilim are the byproduct, the offspring of fallen angels and human women, creating a hybrid being, which is soulless, in my opinion, known as the Nephilim. They shouldn't be here. They were never supposed to be here. And the springboard to this, Eric, is Genesis 3:15. My hat is off to my good friend Gary Stearman, who lectured me in this years ago. Genesis 3:15, you've got Adam and Eve in the garden. They've just blown it. They've known they've blown it. They are hiding from the Lord. They are terrified. You've got the dragon. You've got Hasatan, the shining one, and Nakash over here. And then in the center, you've got the pre-incarnate Jesus, the pre-incarnate Messiah, who says to the dragon, and this is imperative. In fact, in the book, I spend lots of time unpacking Genesis 3:15. Jesus, the pre-incarnate Christ, says to the dragon, your offspring will be at war with the offspring of the woman. The proto-evangelium, the offspring from the woman, will crush your head, you'll bruise its heel. That's the entire biblical narrative. And it's not taught in seminaries, and most churches have no idea. But that's the whole thing. It sets up everything.
So what you're introducing is the concept of satanic offspring.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Tucker Carlson tells Joe Rogan that aliens are actually demons and spiritual forces. Recently, Tucker Carlson went on Joe Rogan's podcast and talked about a lot of things, but one thing that came up and caught my attention was the discussion about aliens.
Deeper level is so if they're spiritual beings, which I believe they are, it's a binary. They're either, you're on team good or team bad. You can assign any name to it you want, but what are these things? The core idea does not differ, never has differed from caves until now, that we're being acted on by spiritual forces. That battle, that unseen battle around us, that spiritual battle, has been the basis of every society, of every religion, not just Christianity's.
So Tucker Carlson is probably one of the first people in the mainstream media to say what aliens actually are, and that's demons. And he spells it out for Joe really simply. Let's look at Ephesians 6:12, which says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces, against principalities and powers that sit in heavenly places. So the Bible is in line and in step with what we would expect to see. And the whole conflict throughout the entire Bible is what? Angels and God versus Satan and his demons. In the book of Revelation, we see that there was a war in heaven and that Michael cast out the dragon, but the dragon's tail drew a third of the stars, which were his angels. So we see this great controversy established at the very beginning of Earth's history. Good versus evil. Now, what's interesting to me is not only this perspective that Tucker is offering, but the fact that this was also predicted by several other people prior to now. And most distinctly, someone in 1982 named Roger Monroe came out and went from the occult and discussed what the grand master plan of Satan would be at the end of time.
Because it says spirits, demon spirits, will declare themselves to be inhabitants of far distant planets in the galaxies that are coming to warn the inhabitants of planet Earth of the impending destruction of the planet, unless something seriously proper is done to avoid it. So he went on explaining about the fact that the spirits will show themselves willing to give valuable guidance that will not only help people avoid the destruction of the planet, but it will cause it to enter into a higher state of existence.
So these alien forces, they're not come to destroy us. They're not come to take us over. They're come to persuade us to a life of truth. Now, what do we know about the devil and his tactics? That he always takes truth, distorts it, and uses it through deception. And it's no different here. What we're going to see in the end times is exactly what's mirrored in the Bible, where miracles will be worked, lying signs and deception will be worked, and all the unrighteous will go after them. Now, it's interesting that as we come to the close of Earth's history and the return of Jesus Christ, that we start seeing this more and more frequently. And what's also interesting is how Tucker frames this as this has been something that has been discussed for generations up until now. And wouldn't you know it, the deception is still there. Good versus evil, right versus wrong, But instead of having a context of spiritual nature, we instead have this context of like science fiction. So as we start to see this more and more,
It's my personal belief, based on a fair amount of evidence, that they're not aliens. They've always been here. And I do think it's spiritual. That's my view. So, and again, it's not provable, but based on the evidence, I think.
I'm with you. Absolutely.
I think if the U.S. government has in fact had direct contact with these beings, whatever they are, I've already told you what I think they are, and has entered into some sort of agreement with them, which is the claim of informed people, I would say. Whether they're right or wrong, I can't say conclusively. But if that is true, I mean, it's a very, very, very heavy thing.
Yeah. A lot of people say interdimensional beings.
Right. I want to ask, are angels and demons, or how would you describe these beings?
You know, these are, again, I'm getting into the realm of conjecture, so I just want to say that flat out.
Entity?
But one thing I know for a dead certain fact, having seen it, is that there is good and evil, that we are being acted upon at all times. And I think every person can feel that in himself. I mean, there are moments when you are moved to do things that are much better than you actually are, and that are also more evil and destructive than you actually are. You are subject to forces from outside yourself. That is absolutely true. Now, we can argue about what they are, but every person in the room, if he's reflective, will tell you, yes, I know what you're talking about. And so there are forces that are not human, that do exist in a spiritual realm of some kind, that we cannot see, and that when you think about it, sort of make you think we live in an ant farm.
Yeah.
Being right? And that's that is real. Yeah. Okay.
You make the observation in your book, and you say that you have said it many times when you were president of the United States, that no president is ever going to desert Israel. Right?
Correct. I put it more bluntly. I said, as I told congressional leaders during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, no American president will let Israel go down the tube.
All right.
Democrat or Republican, it's not an issue.
That is stated fairly categorically, and yet in your book you make it clear at the same time that Israel really is not of any enormous strategic value to the United States anymore.
That's correct.
So why then would the United States continue to burden itself with huge loans, in some cases outright grants, to the Israelis, jeopardize possibly young American fighting men when there is no strategic value involved, or little strategic
Because the United States is concerned by more than strategic values. That's maybe a weakness, but it's the way we are. And there are moral issues involved here. We don't have an alliance with Israel, as you know. They're not an ally of the United States in the technical sense. But we have a bond to Israel that's much stronger. It's a moral commitment. A moral commitment because of what happened during the Holocaust, and a moral commitment because it is a democracy, the only democracy in that area. And under the circumstances, that is why American presidents and the American people in the future will support all out the survival of Israel if it's attacked.
You've always been a very tough, pragmatic man. And I just wonder if you were the president of Israel and you heard Richard Nixon talking that way, or for that matter, heard any sitting American president talk that way, and say, but there's really no strategic value anymore, how much faith would you place in that kind of a moral commitment if push really came to shove?
If I were the president of Israel, I put a great deal of faith in it because of the track record of the United States, and also because he would know that that is the way the American people are. There is no doubt whatever of our commitment to Israel.
What I can tell you is that prior to World War II, and you again can pivot to your browser right now and look up a man named Abraham Pollock, okay, prior to World War II, he extensively wrote about, and the Israeli historians extensively wrote about the fact that they were the Khazars. They were like, yeah, here's the evidence, blah, blah, blah. He received awards from Tel Aviv University. And then suddenly after World War II, they said to him, like, this research was not helpful, and they just stopped printing his books. So I don't know. I literally can't tell you. And now if you ask someone about that, they'll say, oh, well, the science changed. Yes, we know. The science always changes. The research always changes. Very convenient, but that's what that person is referring to. I'm just letting you know when he says the Khazars. Now, in case you're not familiar at all with who the Khazars are, outside of whether or not you can draw a line from the Khazar Empire, the Khazarian Empire, my understanding, and I have not done enough research into it, essentially, it was an empire. And can you fact check it again? This would be in Ukraine, and what would be modern Ukraine? And let me know in my ear when you dig that up, Mark.
We're checking.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that it was in what would have been deemed modern Ukraine. It all goes back to Ukraine. But essentially, they were worshiping and doing things that were considered so immoral and so corrupt. And I'm talking about sexual stuff. And I'm also talking about in the way that they cheated people, that they were given an option from modern, I would say Iran, but Persia and Russia, like either you convert to one of the faiths that we think will make you more moral, or we will crush you. And so there was this mass conversion in the 8th century, and you can fact check me on that too. I think it was the 8th century where the Khazarians mass converted to Judaism as the faith. And to be clear, it was the people that were running this empire at the top who were just up to no good, and they carried on their corruption. They carried on their sexual deviancy despite pretending to have converted to Judaism. That doesn't mean the people that they ruled over didn't meaningfully convert. I'm sure they did, but the people at the top didn't. And so Russia and I'm saying Iran because my brain is not doing. Russia and Persia teamed up and crushed the Khazarian Empire. And so there has been a theory for a while that what is happening is that the Khazarians are reassembling, and that essentially they want to crush Russia and Iran, which is kind of happening right now, actually, which is interesting to think about. I hadn't even thought about that until right now, that they at least do seem to really want war with Russia and Iran. But I'm just giving you guys that information so that you can know why that person commented on that. I can only tell you books that I've read from Israeli historians, but they say the science has been updated, so who knows? Now it's what was once established Israeli science is now anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. So I can't tell you what's right and what's wrong anymore in today's world.
Israeli children who died, as do I. But I'm able to care about both sides of children who've died. Why don't you care, seemingly, about the Palestinian children who've died? Why can't you express any sympathy or sorrow or empathy with the children who've died in Gaza? Are you able to do that?
I warn all Arabs from all sides, from all borders, warn them, stop educating children to hate
So just to be clear, I've now offered you three times.
I made myself very clear.
Oh, you've made yourself very clear.
You asked me 5 times.
I'm going to give you one last...
You asked me 7 times.
Okay, I'm going to give you one last chance to offer some empathy or sympathy or sorrow about the deaths of 20,000 children in Gaza. Are you capable of doing that?
I can tell you that had you cared, and I don't believe you that you care a tiny bit about one killed person, if you do not use the means that you have as a media person to stop educating children.
I gave you 4 chances.
Jews. Okay, you gave me 7. You gave me 7.
And you know what? You couldn't give a damn, could you?
That you are to blame more than me.
You don't care, and all you want is all the Palestinians gone. You can barely even bring yourself to say their name. All you want is to take over the West Bank and Gaza. You don't care how many die in the process. You want them all gone. You don't care, do you? That's the bottom line.
As you said, the audience will judge.
Yeah, they will.
How many civilians have been killed in Gaza, from what you know?
Who gives a shit?
Okay, but don't you feel like, for example, children?
Children grow up to be Arabs.
את יודעת כמה חפים מפשע נהרגו בעזה?
טוב, אז כנראה שנעצור.
את לא רוצה לענות על זה?
תודה.
אוקיי, אפשר לשאול למה?
כי אני לא חושבת שיש מישהו שהוא חף פשע שם. צר.
אבל את יודעת כמה חפים מפשע נהרגו בעזה?
לא, זה גם לא מעניין אותי.
לא? למה?
לא מעניין אותי, אני...
What is your current big issue?
Gaza. I feel it particularly because I'm Jewish, because I know how much wickedness and cruelty were meted out to Jews in my lifetime. I was born in 1941 at the height of the Holocaust, and I cannot bear to think that my people are doing exactly the same thing to another nation. And the nation that they're doing it to, the Palestinian nation, was not responsible for the Holocaust, had nothing to do with it. That was a purely European pleasure. And so my heart is broken. And I think the terrible thing I have to face is that Hitler won. He changed us. He made us like him.
Operation Paperclip, one of the most controversial U.S. programs in history. After World War II, America secretly brought over 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and doctors to work for the U.S. government. First, one of the most famous recruits, Wernher von Braun, the mastermind behind NASA's Saturn V rocket. Yep, the guy who helped put Americans on the moon first built rockets for Hitler. Second, many of these scientists had direct ties to war crimes, but the U.S. scrubbed their records to make them hireable. Some were even given new identities.
Operation Paperclip.
Come see the bomb Alabama weather. Come try the BBQ. Come see life free from the guilt.
Come see all our new white friends.
Come to Huntsville, Alabama, home of the Space and Rocket Center. Staffed by Nazi scientists smuggled here by your government. Oh yeah, it really happened. Huntsville, Alabama. It's some fucked up shit. But hey, we got to the moon.
So, your history teacher never taught you about Operation Paperclip, but that's okay, because Valenti Videos is going to tell you all about it real quickly. You see, right after World War II, there was a little thing called the Nuremberg trials, where a whole lot of these Germans were going to answer for their crimes. However, before it started, the United States began Operation Paperclip, where we started to take a whole bunch of these German scientists and bring them over to the United States so that they didn't have to answer for their crimes. You see, the Russians started scooping up a whole bunch of them right after the war ended, and then we decided, you know what, we ought to do the same thing, considering we're about to enter a new age where we're competing against the Soviet Union for global supremacy. So we scoop up a whole bunch of these German scientists. One of them is Wernher von Braun, who was the head of NASA. He was also a real rat bastard. You can look up the shit that he did. However, we smuggled all these German scientists into the United States, but they needed new names. They needed new records. We had to relocate them to the South so that they could make good friends. And, the only thing that was supposed to be left over from their old paperwork with their real names and their real history was the paperclip mark, the little imprint that the paperclip would leave behind when you put the new file on top of the old file, hence the name Operation Paperclip.
It's pretty much the high point of the American empire.
Hi folks, I really appreciate Dr. Roy Casagrande and what he does. He teaches political science at Austin Community College. I think that's where he still is, and I really wish that he was on TikTok. But what this illustrates is a really important point about why historians are needed to provide some context for a couple of these issues. And this is a really important issue when we're talking about American exceptionalism, when we're talking about these kind of blinders that people put on when they look back at American accomplishments and American achievements. We can see that happening in this video. And this is not to criticize Dr. Casagrande. This is really just to go ahead and make sure that we're providing some added layer of context to this because it matters. His main point is really about the scientific achievements that we haven't accomplished anything like we accomplished with going to the moon. And that the core part of going to the moon is the Saturn V rocket. This is what he says. And that it's American achievement that does that. The problem is that that's not what happens. And if we're going to have an honest 250th, we need to be honest about it all. I'm not saying he's being dishonest. I'm just saying he's being incomplete. That we need to sort of add on to it. That it's not Americans. Just like it's not the French the Americans who win the American Revolution, it's the French. It's not the Americans who get us to the moon. It's the Nazis. And this is a part of history that a lot of people don't talk about, but we need to talk more about. There are a couple of small documentaries, small pieces about it, but why this has not been a part of anything broader, I don't get. You can watch Apollo 13 all you want, but at the very end of celebrating the space race, we have to understand that this is the product of Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip was the decision by the United States government to rescue as many Nazi scientists as possible at the end of the European phase of World War II, to make sure that they are not falling into Soviet hands and that they were able to assist American growth during the Cold War. Take a look at Operation Paperclip. Take a look at the almost 2,000 scientists, between 1,000 and 2,000 Nazi scientists they bring over. We're not just talking about scientists who end up working for the Nazis. We are talking about people from Werner von Braun on down who are members of the SS, who are directly complicit in concentration camp atrocities, in working concentration camp prisoners to death in order to achieve their goals for the Nazi rocket program. The United States doesn't achieve anything with the rocket program. They don't achieve anything in terms of the science that's required to provide for the healthcare of getting men to the moon. Science health becomes a whole new thing. Why? Because of all of the Nazi scientists brought over. And so we're not just talking about people who happen to be Germans and they wanted to go ahead and continue their work, so they ended up working for the Nazis. We're talking card-carrying members, full-on board members of the Nazi Party, who were part of the SS, who were part of the party, who were signed on to the Nazi project, who happened to benefit from the fact that the Americans wanted them to go ahead and jumpstart the American rocket program, which turned into the American space program. And it's not just the guys at the top like von Braun. It is more than 1,000 scientists, between 1,000 and 2,000 scientists. Were a couple of them identified by the Department of Justice as being war criminals? Yeah, but long after they retired from active service at NASA and in other parts of the U.S. government. Long after. And we're talking about a handful of them who were kicked out of the United States, sent back to Germany, long after that their active use to the United States space, rocket and space program. So whenever we think about celebrating us getting to the moon as being part of a great American achievement, we have to, again, engage in some honest history here and know that America never would have done that if there wasn't a swastika behind that effort.
Look at it this way. You can't have a war called the War Against Evil, that's the other name for WW2, and then keep some of that evil after you win. That means evil won. Do you understand that? Like, that's a trope in a lot of media where, like, they vanquish the big bad foe, and then right before the credits cut, a little bit of that foe slinks off, and then, of course, lo and behold, it comes back even stronger. And as far as discoveries go, the math ain't changing. That'll be discovered in 10, 20 years tops. I would much rather have to wait a couple decades to, get the math back, as long as it means I don't have evil demons literally in the government and propagating. But if we didn't have that science, we wouldn't have been able to overtake Russia in the space race. Because communism's the big bad evil guy, even though they probably did more than America did in the war to win, but that's a whole other story. And at the end of the day, the bad guys from World War II made all their shit after, like, us. They did the big laurels and eagles and fucking Jim Crow-like laws. Like, come on, dude. Why do you think America had that thing at Madison Square Garden where they, let them do their thing? And then why did America stay out of it for so long?
They communicate. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I wrote a book about Operation Paperclip, and my God, talk about a rabbit's hole.
That's a rabbit hole.
It's a rabbit hole.
Let's explain to people that don't know what we're talking about. Operation Paperclip was when, after World War II, the United States gathered up a ton of scientists from Nazi Germany, brought them over to America, and even Werner von Braun. They had Werner von Braun run NASA. He was a Nazi, like 100% Nazi.
Good friends with Hitler type Nazi.
Yes, he ran a Berlin rocket factory where they hung the 5 slowest Jews. They would hang them, out front, so everybody would know, like, this is what happens when you work slow. We'll hang you. I mean, the Simon Wiesenthal Center said that if Wernher von Braun was alive today, they would prosecute him for crimes against humanity.
Yes, they would.
And that was the head of NASA. That was the head of NASA. That was the guy who got us to the moon. That was the big cheese guy. Yeah. So we were willing to put a lot of really dark things aside in order to gather up the best scientists so that the Soviet Union couldn't get them all. And they got a few of them as well. But we got how many? More than 1,000, right?
Allegedly 1,400, but I would not be surprised if, the story changes and there were more, right?
Yeah.
But that goes back to our discussion earlier about being in pole position. I mean, that's why we grabbed those Nazis. We were like, if we don't get them, the Russians will.
I get it. And, and I'm sure the Nazis could say, I didn't want to do it. They made me. I'm a nice person. I love Jews.
Well, that was part of the mythology. It was like, we got the good Germans. Well, no, we didn't.
Right.
We got the top Germans, and who do you think the top Germans were?
Yeah.
They were coveted by Hitler, Himmler, Goring,
Yeah.
I mean, these guys were right. I mean, there were guys that we grabbed out of the docks at Nuremberg literally to come be part of our program,
One of these if you're smart, you're an asset, right? I mean, that's what Genghis Khan used to do. He'd take warlords from the other side and capture them and go, listen, just come over here, bro. Come on. Work for me. I'm the man.
I mean, ideology aside, I'm super smart and I want that to be known. That's kind of that's the competitor, right? I mean, you cannot be the best rocket designer in the world and not want those talents, demonstrated. That's Wernher von Braun's story. That's the story of all of them. And that was so shocking writing that book, because it's like, wow, huge amounts of talent, but how far will the competitor go to see their baby come to fruition? What are they willing to put aside?
Yeah.
They didn't bring us here to change the past.
Say that again.
They didn't bring us here to change the past.
They didn't bring us here at all.
What if I told you everything Elon's doing was in a book? A book written by a German brought over after World War II in Operation Paperclip. Wernher von Braun in 1948 wrote a book called Project Mars. It was released in 1953. But basically, war breaks out on planet Earth and it becomes necessary to travel to Mars. And can you guess who they meet on Mars? The Elon. The Elon and his cabinet of 10 men run Mars and the Martian government. And of course, the Elon teaches the Earthlings his views on ethics, morality. Of course, they live underground. And I'm going to go ahead and guess that's where Elon and the Boring Company comes about. It's maddening to think this is what's shaping our world right now. That an apartheid South African emerald mine owner could name his son after somebody in a schmatzy book. And now that dude's just the richest man on earth, infecting every form of politics. But did you ever have a doubt he was named after?
You do eventually colonize Mars. What are you planning on doing to make it habitable?
Well, at first, you would have to have a life support system, because Mars has a low-density atmosphere, only about 1% the density of Earth, and it's primarily CO2. Over time, you can terraform Mars. Terraform means make it like Earth, essentially. If you warm Mars up, you will, there's a bunch of frozen CO2 that will evaporate, densify the atmosphere, and you'd actually want kind of global warming on Mars. It appears highly likely that Mars had liquid oceans, albeit a long time ago. Mars is covered in ice. And now the ice is then covered in dust for the mostly, except at the poles. So there's a lot of ice. In fact, I believe if Mars was warmed up, you'd have an ocean about a mile deep on 40% of the planet.
I think we could have 1 million people on Mars in 20 years.
Yes.
And what's the technology we're missing right now? When you think about 1 million people on Mars, Do we have the ability to get water, to get food, to keep them safe? I mean, what do we need to make that happen?
Well, you need to recreate the entire base of industry of Earth. So, we're here at the top of a massive pyramid of industry that starts with mining a vast array of materials, those materials going through hundreds of steps of refinement. We grow food, obviously. We grow trees. We make things out of the trees. You've got to build all that on Mars. And Mars is a hostile environment. It's it sometimes gets above zero on a warm summer day near the equator on Mars. It's quite cold.
And how do you prep for that?
Well, in the beginning on Mars, you have to have a life support habitation module.
Right.
Like you can't just live outdoors. You can't breathe the air.
Like a dome, you think is likely?
Yeah. Glass dome.
Turns out tonight Elon Musk blew something up and disrupted the lives of thousands of Americans. For the second time in less than 2 months, a rocket launched by Elon Musk's company SpaceX exploded and rained potentially dangerous debris down over a wide area of Earth, causing real chaos for planes and airline passengers. This was the most recent test of SpaceX's Starship rocket. Musk says he wants to use Starship to one day take people to Mars. This one lifted off around 6:30 p.m. Eastern from the southern tip of Texas. In a statement, SpaceX said that, quote, during Starship's ascent burn, the vehicle experienced a rapid unscheduled disassembly. Rapid unscheduled disassembly is kind of Elon Musk's specialty these days, especially in a way that really messes with other people through no fault of their own. As debris rained down tonight from Elon Musk's failed rocket, multiple airports in Florida, including Miami and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach and Orlando, were all brought to a complete halt, ground stop at all of those airports. Even departures as far north as the Philadelphia airport were significantly delayed. Now, as I mentioned, this is the second time this has happened in recent weeks. SpaceX's last test of the Starship rocket suffered a similar fate in mid-January. When that happened, the FAA grounded Starship and has since been overseeing SpaceX's investigation of what went wrong. Even though that investigation is still underway, last week, the FAA nevertheless cleared SpaceX to launch another one, even though the investigation into why the last one blew up wasn't complete. Why'd they clear it? I don't know. But of course, in between those two flights, Donald Trump was sworn in as president. He installed Elon Musk, his top campaign donor, as kind of his co-president. Musk's Doge austerity operation fired hundreds of people at the FAA. And the FAA reportedly decided to suddenly start using Starlink satellite terminals made by Musk's company.
But the cars themselves, so what is this one, Elon?
That's a Model Y.
That's a Model Y, so I have a lot of information to put into price.
Yeah.
I want to make a good deal here. You know, I do notice this. They have one, which is $35,000, which is pretty low. What is that all about?
Yeah, it's. I guess we want to make the point that Teslas aren't all expensive. You can get a Tesla for as little as $35,000.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank the president for his support. This means a lot.
Didn't get her parents, by the way, were very fanatical in favor of apartheid. This is quite interesting. Her parents came to South Africa from Canada because they sympathized with the Afrikaner government. They used to support Hitler and all that sort of stuff. But they didn't know, obviously, I don't think they knew what the Nazis were doing. But they in Canada, they were in the German party in Canada. And they sympathized with the Germans.
Yeah.
So when the Afrikaners government came into power here in 1948, then May's father, who was quite an interesting guy, he was a very good pilot, he said he wants to be with the Afrikaners because he agrees with apartheid, you see.
The founder of NASA, which is this deceptive organization that collects billions of dollars from taxpayers every year, was a man by the name of Werner von Braun. Now, this Werner von Braun, he was a German. He was a German engineer who played a prominent role in all aspects of rocketry and space exploration. first in Germany and after World War II in the United States. So it's funny because these engineers came from Germany after World War II, and they came to and received prominent positions in the U.S. government.
Prominent positions.
Now, when Werner von Braun died, his tombstone, or his the place where they buried him, has a scripture, and that scripture is Psalms chapter 19, from verse 1. And you know what it says? The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. So this guy who's supposedly the head of NASA's space exploration, he knew that the earth is covered with a firmament that is furled. They're deceiving masses.
Let's go. Oh, man. It's good. Let's go. No way.
Where's it coming back to land here?
When Werner von Braun was dying of cancer, he asked me to be his spokesperson, to appear on occasions when he was too ill to speak. And I did. And what he asked me to do was to educate decision makers and the public about why we shouldn't be putting weapons in space, why they're a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea, and what the alternatives are, how we could be building a cooperative space system. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again during the approximately 4 years that I had the opportunity of working with him, and that was the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers, and the scare tactics, the spin that was being put on a weapons system. And that was how we identify an enemy. The enemy, at first he said, the enemy against whom we're going to build a space-based weapon system that he thought was a ridiculous idea, unnecessary and very dangerous, not to mention too costly, etc. The strategy that Werner von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the next enemy was asteroids. Now at this point, he kind of chuckled the first time he said it. Asteroids, against asteroids we're going to build space-based weapons. So it was funny then. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie. A lie. So when I hear that there's a possible threat of extraterrestrials, and I look at the history of thousands of years of possible visitations, recorded history, and when I hear now the stories of the disclosures of honest military intelligence industry people who have had experiences with UFOs, with crashes and landings, with live or dead bodies of extraterrestrial beings, people from out in the universes. And if I'm ever told that these are enemies against whom we have to build space-based weapon systems, based on my own personal experience of having worked in the military-industrial complex on weapon systems and military strategy, I'm going to know it's a lie. It's a lie. And I'm not only not going to believe it, but I'm going to go out as loudly as I can and tell everyone to take a look. They have not taken us away yet. We're still here after thousands of years of visits. If in fact they're still visiting us now and people are working with ETs, live or dead, if they're taking photographs, if they're experiencing all kinds of UFO experiences, then we have to look at this as something that is not a hostile occurrence. It would be my guess, based on my own experience of having traveled to countries whom we've been told had hostile intentions against the United States, it would be my hope and my intention to do everything I could to work with people who are working to communicate with and cooperate with these extraterrestrial beings, because they're clearly not hostile.
The highlights from NASA's press conference regarding UFOs. No matter what your feelings are on this topic, this is a major moment in our history where our government and NASA, for the first time ever, are acknowledging UFOs, UAPs, with a serious approach. Keep in mind, most of these people are scientists, so they talk like scientists. And everything that they said comes from a scientific perspective. And after 4 hours of that, it's definitely what we got. This guy, Dan Evans, who works for NASA, claims that NASA is going to be fully transparent with the public. Dr. Kirkpatrick's testimony, he said that we have observed objects in the air that we do not understand. These objects behave with characteristics that are difficult to explain, and we have not been able to identify what these objects are. Kirkpatrick explained that many of the UAPs and UFOs have been identified, from being an aircraft to a bird or a weather balloon, but the percentage of ones they haven't been able to identify are ones that we need to focus on. Mike Free with the FAA was saying that any UAP reports from their pilots are taken seriously and will be handed over to NASA. And with our whistleblower protection program now in place for military service pilots, those individuals who have experienced UAPs or experience UAPs will be able to come forward and share their stories as well. And none of the current data surrounding the UAPs that have been documented suggest that they're extraterrestrial. Over 800 UAP reports that they are looking through. Most of them are classified, some of them that are declassified. The ones that are classified will eventually be released to the public, but it's not until they have enough data to give more of an understanding of that footage for the public to know what they're looking at. They actually gave an explanation as to why some of the quality looks poor. And that's because we do have access to technology that can look at a UAP or UFO when it's first reported. Unfortunately, we have privacy laws in this country that prevent us from being able to use those sensors to look at those UFOs, because let's say they're in your backyard, that's where it gets a little dicey. Even offered up the idea, if you're an app developer, consider this, where if we had an app that could interact with our phone's cameras, because our cameras on our phones now have been upgraded so much so that if there was a reading for the sensors being used when they are filming UAPs or UFOs and then sending them in to NASA, they have more data to go along with the recordings. Outside of those main points, it was a lot of science jargon, honestly. Just went over many topics of how they're going to address collecting the data, the sensors, and all of the stuff involved for the scientific method. But we need to be on the lookout for the end of July when they're going to release a more in-depth report, and hopefully we'll see some more of those classified videos.
Hello, I'm Carol Rosin, and I'm in Arizona right now at the 20th anniversary of the Disclosure Project, where I was a witness in Washington, D.C. in May 2001. At that event, I spoke for Wernher von Braun. I gave his warning to the world that there was going to be a faked alien invasion. He called it the last card that would be played in the entire war game, which has scenarios of formulas for wars, enemies, sanctions, fighting, killing, leapfrogging the technology. Von Braun, the father of rocketry, when I became the first woman executive in that aerospace industry, Von Braun taught me and gave me his deathbed assignment to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space.
So I came here to give a reminder about that warning of Wernher von Braun, that the last card is being played right now. You're seeing it in the media. You're seeing faked pictures. You can't tell whether a UFO is a real one or not. They're not even UFOs, they're identified. Dr. Greer is explaining at this event that there are so many that are man-made. It's the old game of having to have the next enemy, so that you have an enemy that you can keep building the war game against, keep that economy going, and dominate and control the entire space around all of us. And I know some of you, if you're aware of it, are noticing that we're being controlled right on this planet in so many different ways. Wernher von Braun wanted to open that up. He worked under Hitler. He actually learned that from experience we can use the technology for the good or for war. And we will never, ever be safe if we escalate the arms race into that place above all of our heads. In the United States where I live, there's a huge momentum to close off even access to space without permission, without the United States and allies dominating and controlling space. So there's an enemy mentality. Well, I could go on with that scenario for a long time and explain it further, but I think most of you listening to this know what I'm talking about. The problem is we don't see a way out of it if we're looking for earthbound solutions, which leads me to then talking about the treaty that was introduced by Russia and China decades ago. It's been called for over and over again. It's been updated in 2008, 2014. It's now ready to be signed into a binding world law, and that's all we need to get done. But how do we get that done? Do we have a peace president? Since we have in the United States been at war for 93% of our time since 1776, when this country was formed. We don't have a peace president. And I'm calling on the leaders of the world right now, as are some of the people who put together over 100 of them who are now committed to not be the first to place weapons in outer space, on now finding a leader who will put them together to sign this treaty, send it to the United Nations Secretary General, who will then announce that we have a binding world law to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space. This treaty exists. It's on my website, peaceinspace.com, that's been put together by experts all over the world. If you look down the news section, you'll see some of these experts, many from Russia and China. And I also have that same information multiplied over with including 700 plus videos of speeches from the Ziegel's readings that have been put together by Professor Alexander Simonov in Russia. Hundreds of people coming twice a year to Russia to give their talks about different issue areas that have solutions, but that now are suffering with extreme problems. And I've met so many people in Russia, in the office of the president. Vladimir Ermakov, who speaks English, came to me last time in December 2019 when I was there and whispered in my ear, you know, Carol, we had the same conversation 35 years ago. The only difference is that now I have grandchildren. Well, I haven't had children. I have 400 million orphans, however. I see hundreds of species disappearing every week. I see earth changes that are so dangerous and people are suffering all over the world. And are we prepared? Well, the theme of the war game is prepare for war, prepare to win. I say that the Space Forces have a new role to play. They need to be a force, but a force now to solve these urgent problems. They have the technology in the military, industrial, lab, university, intelligence community, NASA, and other international space and defense agencies and intelligence community to use the technologies and our highest consciousness to solve these problems. But we need to do it fast because the extinction process is well underway and it's in an accelerated motion. So I'm leaving you with the thought that we can have peace on Earth if we can maintain it in outer space, invite our neighbors in, get to know that that is a reality. We are not alone and there is no hostility. There are no neighbors that are hostile or threats from space. We're all together as one family. That's not rhetoric, it's the truth, but it extends into outer space. And now we have a tool, this treaty, that you'll read on peaceandspace.com and support. Call on the leaders. I'm calling on President Putin right now to lead the way and become our first planetary peace president. And may peace prevail in space so that we can have peace on Earth. Thank you.
We have been promoting for many years in the United Nations a resolution prohibiting putting any nuclear weapons into outer space. The country which is categorically against it is the United States. At the same time, the United States promotes an approach according to which they want to prohibit putting conventional weapons in outer space. And they cannot answer the question, does this mean that nuclear weapons, they would be planning to move to the orbit? So my answer is very clear. We have been championing in the United Nations a legal prohibition of placing any nuclear weapons in outer space.
Made anything which would not have to be considered closed. So I don't want you to answer what they've said necessarily.
Allies have seen these. China has established its own version of a UAP task force, so clearly a number of countries have observations of things in the airspace that they can identify.
And do we share data with some, with all? Are they sharing with us?
We share data with some, and some share data with us.
But not necessarily all that have publicly reported something?
That's correct.
Okay. And I think that's an important thing, and for the other session, actually, that we don't discuss that now. Because, you know, obviously something like this can be a national security challenge for us, and no doubt about it. If they're developed by an adversary through some breakthrough technology, they can be very disruptive to our military actions, or at least serve as a distraction. So my caution would be careful who we share our data with, and don't necessarily trust some of the data we may get from someone else. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Himes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the objectives of this open hearing is to try to erode some of the stigma that attaches to, in particular, our military men and women reporting this. It's obviously really very serious because should one of our adversaries have developed a technology that we don't know about it, we need to know about it yesterday. And obviously, any sort of stigma that prevents our military from reporting this data as comprehensively as possible is a national security threat. So I really just have two questions in the service of that goal. The first is, the chairman asked that we run that video again. Most people, when they see a video, we're all used to seeing things from a car, seeing things from a sidewalk. Very few people have the experience of observing something.
The first thing I think that's important to note about this is there are lots of things when you are moving very fast and an object is between you and a stationary reference point like the ground, it gives a lot of different impressions about how quickly something is or isn't moving. And it actually means it is a challenge, especially with narrative-based data, to get a lot of information on that. That's why the sensor data is so important, because things do happen very quickly, as you see there. And sometimes things that happen very quickly, something may be moving very slow. That aircraft is moving quite fast. How fast that object is moving that goes by is probably very slow.
So I guess my point is that an observation...
We now know where the giant asteroid that's heading towards Earth might actually hit. For those of you that don't know, there's an asteroid that's on path to hitting planet Earth in the year 2032. It's about 300 feet wide and it can easily destroy a city. And if you don't believe me, just look it up for yourself. So the lucky country that will most likely be hit by this massive asteroid called YR24 is the UK. So there's a few different places in the UK that it will most likely hit, and we have a little chart here to help us understand a little bit better about what the impact damage will be. So if you're in the red zone, then you're pretty much done for. Orange, you're also pretty much done for. Honestly, if you're in the green even, you're done for. Let's get real. The only place that you're not even still safe is going to be the yellow area where you're still probably going to get glass in your eye. Here's a list of the cities that could be hit in the UK. We got Nottingham, Birmingham, Manchester, whew, Cardiff. I've actually never even heard of that. Maybe it should hit that one. Edinburgh. Oh, and London, bro. Well, now you know. If you're living in any of these cities now, you have a few years to get the hell out of there. Let me know what you guys think about this.
So this is a real nerve center for the U.S. government.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
like
it's
one
of the big ones.
It
in
is.
the country.
Yes.
Okay, so does a V2 look like this?
It's much smaller.
And so your grandfather, who worked on the V2,
yes,
you were telling me that it stood for something. In German, what did it mean?
The V stood for Vergeltungswaffen, which means revenge weapon.
And the Germans were firing the V2 at the end of the war, right? Into the UK?
Into the UK.
Into Belgium?
Into Belgium, en masse, yes. Into the UK. And as he told me that the largest challenge they had with that missile was guidance systems.
Okay.
Because they didn't have, there were no satellites and no GPSs. They used gyroscopes. So they had to be situated properly on the terrain, aimed properly, and then the gyros had to be calibrated properly, and then they launched them, and they went off on their own. And they were basically an area weapon, not a precision strike weapon.
Okay, but it was technology the West didn't have and the Soviets didn't have.
That is correct.
It was far ahead of everything else.
They were using, I understand the Russians had multiple launch rocket systems that were on portable tracked vehicles that would launch in the battlefield.
Okay.
Limited range, but they were, these V2s had the capability to go, over to the English mainland and into that area too. And so the goal was always to develop a delivery platform for some payload to go further and with more accuracy, which they were actually working on when the war ended. They were developing a multi-stage intercontinental ballistic missile.
Why were the Germans so far ahead?
Well, I just think that they have a unique, intricate interest, and their minds seem to be tuned to work towards, a high technology solution to a hobby, because rocketry was a hobby back in those days, even in the United States.
A hobby?
Yes.
What, like your little model rockets?
Yes.
As kids?
Yes, they were here too, but not to the degree of perfection that the Germans were working on.
Mm. Theo, you're very strict about the camera out here, so keep it down, down, down until we go to these tourist sites.
Yeah. Imagine you're a tourist in a tourist bus. They'll tell you can come and take pictures when we get out of the bus. They don't want you filming the buildings.
Nothing over there.
And the building numbers. You see, that identifies a location. I mean, for obvious reasons.
Right.
Rocket Park. These were rockets that were developed here. Now, the one on the left looks like a V2, but it's not. I think
that smaller one there?
Yeah, that's the Hermes missile.
So this is a new world for me. Where am I wrong here? Where am I right? The NASA was mostly German engineers in the beginning?
Well,
what percentage?
Commissioners, today I'd like to bring to your attention a potential fraud on an enormous scale happening in your county. There's now clear evidence of NASA using numerous methods to grossly mislead the public about astronauts being on the International Space Station. During interior ISS scenes from NASA's own live feed, the use of wires, harnesses, green screens, and virtual reality have been detected to achieve the appearance of a weightless environment. Examples of this include astronauts fading in and out of the screen, green screen glitches, grabbing objects that aren't really there, pulling on invisible wires, getting tangled in their harnesses, and even astronauts appearing out of thin air. This begs the obvious question. If they're really up there, why are they using Hollywood techniques to fake the footage? Now, unfortunately, I can't show you these clips in here today, but I will be sending them to you. Outside the International Space Station, during spacewalks, air bubbles have been recorded on numerous occasions. How is it possible for air bubbles to be present in the vacuum of space? I once questioned astronaut Scott Kelly about this phenomenon. His body language and answers only created more questions. In 2013, astronaut Luca Parmitano nearly drowned during a spacewalk when his helmet filled with water. This happened again just last year. Air bubbles, helmets filling with water, and drowning. Are they in space or are they underwater? Now, what's really interesting is that they trained for spacewalks in an underwater pool with a complete ISS replica. Now, surely they aren't filming these spacewalks in an underwater pool and then editing them to appear if they're in space, because that sure would be something, wouldn't it? I'm calling on the Brevard County Commissioners to open a full investigation into NASA's fraudulent practices and use of taxpayer dollars. It costs NASA $3 billion per year to operate the ISS, and if they don't have a darn good explanation as to why they're faking these videos, I and the public would like a darn good explanation as to where our tax money is going. And if they are indeed faking the funk, it is our duty to expose and eliminate this fraudulent and astronomically wasteful ISS program. And look, I know what you're all thinking. The NASA is part of the federal government, and you're just county commissioners. Even if what I'm saying is true, what can you do? But let me remind you, not only is this happening in your county, as public officials, you have the platform and the ability to make a statement or hold a press conference, alerting the public, state, and federal authorities to investigate further. You have the power to start the conversation. Video evidence of everything I described today will be emailed to you all, and I truly hope we can get to the bottom of this. I look forward to the day that $3 billion annual budget is put towards our veterans, our homeless, maybe some of that mental health stuff the young lady just spoke about, and the revitalization of Brevard County.
The rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon, and her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. I can't pay no doctor bills, but Whitey's on the moon. 10 years from now, I'll be paying still while Whitey's on the moon. You know the man just upped my rent last night? Because Whitey's on the moon. No hot water, no toilets, and no lights, but Whitey's on the moon. I wonder why he's upping me. Because Whitey's on the moon? I was already giving him $50 a week, and now Whitey's on the moon. Taxes taking my whole damn check. The junkies make me a nervous wreck. The price of food is going up. And as if all that crap wasn't enough, a rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Her face and arms began to swell, and Whitey's on the moon. Was all that money I made last year for Whitey on the moon? How come I ain't got no money here? Whitey's on the moon. You know, I just about had my fill of Whitey on the moon. I think I'll send these doctor bills, air mail special, to Whitey on the moon. We have done a number of songs, we hope, that have strengthened our connection with the third world, because it seems as though oftentimes there are attempts to split us up, divide and conquer, keep us at odds with one another so that we never define the things that we have in common. But we have more things in common than we do that separate us. The song that we wrote was about people who are sometimes referred to as aliens, or worse still, illegal aliens. And we have insisted that this is to differentiate them from folks who have come here from Mars legally. And these are folks who in our song come across near Tijuana or the Rio Grande. They're brought into this country by coyotes, people smugglers. They're forced to pay mordida, the bribes, to keep from being turned into immigration. And when they do that, they're called pollos, chickens, ripe for the plucking. Sometimes these folks come into this country with only their dreams of doing better and the clothes they got on their back. And this is what we have in common with them. The reason we get up every day and decide to try it again is because we have dreams of doing better. The song is about holding on to your dreams. We call the song Alien. You got a little something to help us out with the salsa, see? Mi amigos en la calle, dígame otra vez, uno más por favor, otra vez con la ritma. Midnight near the border, trying to cross the Rio Grande, running with coyotes where the streets are paved with gold, diving underwater when you hear the helicopters, knowing it's all been less than worthless if you're running